wife, my sister-in-law. So then pictures of the farm over there.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
These pictures are all old. My wife's getting me new ones. So kids are keep growing.
Oh, I know.
You got any of your own?
Mine are, Amara will be 2 in January, and my son Landon will be 5 next August.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, time flies.
I'll show you the newest one I got here.
I'll give you a picture too. Try remembering all those birthdays.
I do. It takes a little bit of work, but I remember.
I cheat with mine.
Oh, you got it down.
Yeah, I got my daughters down underneath that one. Yeah, I cheat with those. That way, anytime anybody says, what's your daughter's birthday or what's your son's birthday, I just...
So I get over there, and I don't know where I'm going.
Thank you again.
I've never been over there before in that office, and I've been over there for the AG a couple of times over the years, and once to go to the bureau, which is on the first floor. Okay. And so I walk in there, and security, turn right, go there. Find one security guard, and I'm telling him, okay, I'm going to the Secretary of State's office, and he's like, okay. Well, use your ID. And I'm like, my ID won't get me in anything in this building. Well,
Right.
sure it will. No, it won't. They look similar to, other state employees, but
Right.
it's like, this card does not open up any doors. And so he's like, oh, well and he's like, and you need a mask. I'm like, oh, well, I don't have a mask. So where can I get a mask? Well, then I go back out through the security gate, come back in, and then he tried to take me into Treasury. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to go to Treasury. And so then he's like, well, I don't even know what floor the Secretary of State's on. I'm like, I don't know either. And finally, out of the blue, somebody from the office showed up. They're like, oh, Senator, you're here. And he's like, okay, you've got him now.
Wow.
So, yeah, but we got to talk about my bill regarding Board of Canvassers, because I've been trying to grow the Board of Canvassers.
Right.
Because something that found out was just how integral the canvassers are to the canvassing process in most counties, except Wayne County, which is another problem we're trying to fix. But in several of the big counties, 4 canvassers is not really enough to do the job. So I've been trying to grow that. Well, I think there have been a lot of misunderstandings. So give me my first chance to just sit down with the secretary and say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Right.
If we could stop shooting at this from the allegations that I'm trying to do this or that, all I'm trying to do is provide more resources to the local clerks. So I think we had a good meeting in the minds on the issue, and so hopefully that's going to be able to move forward.
Yeah, we got a lot of people out canvassing right now in the grassroots movement, especially over on the west side of the state, down towards Kent County and such.
Right, but I'm talking like the Board of Canvassers.
Oh.
I'm talking like the official Board of Canvassers.
Gotcha.
The people who help certify the elections.
Right. Alrighty. So speaking of Secretary Benson, I know we've been talking for a while about this. A lot of this is really alarming. The other part of it that's alarming is that I can't get anybody to help me. Nobody. This went to the FBI. And that's just one piece. That first sentence right there on the top of that document.
Right. So, I mean, I was looking back through the stuff that you and I have chatted about over the last several months too, and I guess part of what you might be encountering, and certainly what I encounter, is that there's not necessarily the things that were done wrong and were found to be wrong by the courts specifically, aren't necessarily things that we can then okay, now you get to go to jail kind of things on, or we can sue you and say you committed a crime, go to jail. They're administrative, whether they're done with malfeasance or not is a really, or just were a discretionary decision.
Right.
It's difficult to prove that they were specifically designed to defraud the voters.
Right.
Really challenging thing to prove, and as a legislator, particularly in a difficult position of, that's not my role in particular. Now, if the House were to impeach her over these things, then
Right.
the Senate would suddenly take on a different role, but even then, it's still a political question. Impeachment
Right.
is a political question, not a criminal question.
And see, even if we could get to that aspect, because in one way or another, and you know, I'm involved with a lot of things when it comes to the machines and the ballots and
Mhm,
all that
mhm.
stuff. But it's like I tell everybody, unless we do something about things like this going on in the background and let these people know that we can reach out and touch them
Mhm.
and they're not going to get away with this anymore, they'll continue to do it. Because essentially, Priorities USA wrote our new guidance to
Mhm.
our clerks.
And so the best thing that,
This instructs clerks. This is
Mhm.
this is what they wanted. All the ones in blue is what Priorities USA requested. Now, this is their second lawsuit. The one with Marissa Accardo, they only picked up Marissa Accardo as a plaintiff because they tried putting the case through on their own in the first place, and the judge said that they had no standing. So they went back and got this. Which judge?
no, who's pursuing the case?
Priorities USA.
Priorities USA was originally pursuing the case individually, and then that's when they picked up
Right.
Marissa Accardo. This one is dated for 12/30 of 2019. The original one is dated for 10/30 of 2019. So when Priorities USA was told by the judge that they didn't have any standing, they went back and got Marissa Accardo as a plaintiff 2 months later and filed an amendment on the original complaint. I didn't know if you had gotten to look at Guy Cecile's testimony. His testimony especially, because Guy Cecile is what's his title? Yeah, he is the chairman of Priorities USA. And he specifically talks about in this document how him and Priorities USA are very involved in advertising, targeting minorities, specific race groups in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida.
I'm actively working on this one.
Okay.
I've met with the attorneys with Thomas More Society
Right.
a couple of times now. I've met with the folks in Wisconsin. I mean, I'm actively working on this very issue.
And this pertaining to us in Michigan is what we got out of Priorities USA. Everything that you have and that I have. The other concerning one, which I know you've seen this one, I know you looked at this one. The other very concerning one is from Jonathan Brader, the testimony of Jonathan Brader, which in there he clearly states that for the last year they've been working with Priorities USA doing things to our signature matching process. Now, that's where, because I don't know every single thing, nobody does, but that's where the questions come in for me at. Were they able to do this without getting legislative approval? Because all of it's in here, and I don't know if you remember Senate Bill 757 or not, but everything is in that Senate Bill 757 that was in this lawsuit, except for the signature matching changing. That's the only thing that's excluded from that bill. The 48-hour, which I understand the 48-hour notice. If somebody had a mismatching signature or whatever the case may be, they have 48 hours to correct it. Or, their clerk has 48 hours to notify them. That part I understand. But the rest of this lawsuit with changing the signature matching process and everything to that nature is just completely left out of that Senate bill. So this could have went in front of you guys. This could have went and had approval.
Right, we could have voted on it.
Right.
Yeah.
But on April 21st, ironically the same day that Mark Elias,
There were people who wanted us to add those things to it,
right,
and we chose not to.
and they just did it anyway. So like that's where I get a little bit foggy at in the understanding of how that exactly works. Is there or can there be anything done for them still going ahead and making those changes and giving that guidance to our clerks?
So, generally speaking, I'd have to really drill down on a very specific case by case, but generally speaking, unless the legislature prohibits it explicitly, there is a great deal of administrative flexibility internally granted to an agency to functionally, to make on-the-fly kind of decisions of functionality. So, we tell them things like, hey, you have to have signature verification.
Right.
Well, if we don't describe what signature verification looks like, then they get to determine what signature verification looks like. Now, you get a Secretary of State like this, or some others, they might stretch that verification beyond the bounds of all recognition. And if they get really out there, we can go to court and say, Judge, this is not even close to what we said.
Right.
But if they're only a little bit off, the judge is gonna say, well, that's their discretion. And so it is a subjective determination until the legislature comes back and says, we're gonna absolutely be very prescriptive, or we're gonna be very prohibitive. But generally speaking, there is always within these kind of laws that, just the nature of,
Right.
and this isn't just true of Michigan, but anywhere, we provide that kind of implementation type discretion. So, you tell the DNR, we write a law that says people have to have a hunting license. Well, then the DNR is like, okay, not only do they have to have a license, but it's gotta be this big, and it's gotta be in an envelope tagged onto the back of your jacket.
Right.
And then like, well, but what if I put it on my butt? What if I put it on my arm? Well, now it's discretion of the officer even too, right?
Right.
So there's always these kind of
Now, you guys
discretionary
did disagree with all of this.
And we took them to court
Yeah.
on several of them.
Yeah, I have all the
Some,
paperwork.
we won on some.
Yeah, I have all the paperwork where you guys, adamantly denied all of the allegations that were being made by Priorities USA and
Part of
Marissa
the
Accardo.
danger of this thing that I'm just explaining is that how do we as a legislature prohibit something we never imagined was unclear in the first place? We thought we were
Right.
clear.
Right.
And suddenly it's like, they take it one way and they're like to the judge, well, this is what I thought they told me to do. And we're like, what? We never imagined that.
These are their examples of acceptable signatures that were given to the clerk. This, to me, you have the A and the R, and I'm no handwriting analysis expert, but Bill Smith is acceptable as opposed to William Smith. And they only list 2 questionable signatures on here, and one of the biggest problems with this is, like I said, if you look at the wording from Jonathan Brader's testimony and you look at what Priorities USA wanted, they essentially wrote, and the problem with Priorities USA is not only are they a huge lobbying group from Washington, D.C., they also contributed, $150 million to Joe Biden's campaign in 2020.
And look at all the money Zuckerberg put into Joe, and then he funnels his money into, what is it, the Center for Election Integrity and something else? SETI or something like that? CITL?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
Technology, something in technology, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
They were big players in Wisconsin.
Yep.
So.
Now, Mark Elias is a completely different ballgame because Mark Elias, I don't know, I've heard it pronounced both ways, Elias, mostly Elias, but either way, he's known for, if you look in the testimony from the Steele dossier, he was one of the main attorneys in the Steele dossier case in front of Congress.
Really?
Yeah.
So who's he now? What's he doing this reference to what we're talking about right now?
He was the lawyer that brought this to Michigan. He was the lawyer that represented Priorities USA
Really?
in this case.
Huh.
Yeah. And he was the one that took it to Wisconsin as well.
No kidding. I wasn't aware that he was involved with the Steele dossier too.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
part did he
And-
play in that?
Well, we don't really know because conflict of interest, because he's also an attorney for the Hillary Clinton Foundation.
Of course.
They couldn't get much out of him on the stand because, that confidentiality agreement.
So this issue with third-party money,
Right.
Zuckerberg, Seidel, or however it said, Priorities USA, Rock the Vote, even the League of Women Voters and some of their stuff, that's all stuff that, even in my report says, we're looking into this, and I am. I mean, I've been in meetings on it, and I'm talking about doing more on it, because I think there's really something there. This is genuinely, to me, when people ask me, do you think the election was stolen? Or I was like, yeah, I believe it was stolen prior to November 3rd through the manipulation of information, through the lying to people, through causing people to think Trump did things he didn't do, and
Right.
all of that. I think that's very real. And then the way they targeted their money to clerks to promote the vote of certain demographics is clearly unfair, unconscionable, and immoral. And so, I mean, I'm working on those things.
So I guess,
But they're not necessarily things that I see that when I prove that they happened,
right,
which I hope to do, that would be grounds for saying the election itself, the ballots themselves that were counted wrongly, and that we have to suddenly, that the elections, that there's some, I don't see what we can then do to say, and therefore Michigan's votes don't count.
and see,
That's the part for me. I can't make that connection, because as much as I believe people were lied to, people still voted legitimately.
right,
They shouldn't have voted the way they did, and they voted the way they did because they had bad information, but they still lawfully voted, and the lawful counting of those votes shows the other guy won.
right.
So that's the
See, one of the
disadvantage that
questions,
we're at.
because I'm a big facts person, I like to
Mm-hmm.
see stuff in front of me. And one of the questions I have with that is actually my township, Plainfield Township. My township clerk informed me that the night of the election, they had put the ballots through the machine, and then they put them through the machine again,
Yeah.
and it came out with two different numbers. So they ended up being at the office until 4 a.m, hand counting the ballots that night. Now, that's,
Was that absentee or was that the in-person?
I believe it was in person, because, I think for our tiny township, I think, or I would assume that they had finished up absentee by then.
Which township?
Plainfield,
Well, a lot of times, small townships, the AV is the last thing they count.
because I know that she told me that after they hand counted also, they got a separate number from the two,
Plainfield Township?
yeah, from the two numbers that they had gotten
Which
from the
county is that?
machines. Iosco. The big question I had with this signature matching process is, well, there's also two additional issues as well. So they basically it's kind of like a bowling lane, and they have the bumpers up. Your guys' guidance is the bumpers up on the lane, and they throw the ball, and they just kind of hope that it goes down the middle somewhere. And they can get right on the edge of the gutter, but as long as they don't go in the gutter, then,
That's a fair metaphor.
because to me, it just seems like this group came in even before COVID. Even, the original one was October, even prior to COVID, and just malicized our entire signature verification process. Because it says right there that unless it differs in significant and numerous aspects, it should be resolved in favor of the voter. And the examples they give are just absolutely so poor. And then Jonathan Brader, apparently they were working with them all the way back in 2018. So how do we remedy this the best way possible, I guess is the question, so that, because the people of Michigan, pretty much know that something went on, no matter what it be, that something went on, and this being a big part of it. Because if you don't have an airtight signature matching process, and we had, what was it, like 2.3 million voted by an absentee voter
Sounds
this past
right. It
election?
might have been higher than that.
Yeah.
I think it's probably higher than that.
Yeah, that voted by this past election. Our election in 2018, showed about between 2012 and 2018, there was only about 1,200 ballots that were strictly rejected because they couldn't verify the signature. Now, me personally, and the crazy part is the judge didn't even enter a verdict in this case. He dismissed it without prejudice. This is still open. Anybody can still bring this back up and say, hey, whoa, what's going on here? That's why when they had that,
Well, but right now, we've already passed a law that's forcing them to do the signature verification process through the administrative rules process. So they're no longer allowed to do what they were doing. So the purpose of the lawsuit is kind of moot at this point as far as if you want to pursue a lawsuit to force an outcome.
gotcha.
It
Okay.
might-
Have you looked at the rules process for the signature verification that the Secretary of State filed in the
Oh,
process?
you went to the
Did you
hearing.
go
I
to the
thought.
hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
and then they withdrew the rules.
Yeah. Oh man, if I would have known that Jonathan Brader was one of the ones on that panel that day, I didn't even know because he
Well,
was.
you told me they wouldn't identify themselves for the longest
Yeah,
time.
for like an hour and a half,
Yeah, okay.
they strictly would not tell anybody in that room who they were.
Mhm.
We're like, we just want to know who you guys are with, who you work for,
Yeah, how you got this job.
right? And lo and behold,
I was texting you at the time.
yeah, I remember because I was like, I even told them at one point, I'm like, I don't think certain representatives would appreciate the time that you guys are wasting in simply not providing your names. I'm like, oh look, Senator McBroom's texting me back.
Sure.
But even in that situation, you know, Jonathan Brader sat over there the entire time, sat over in the corner, didn't say a word, not one word, mask on. That's why I didn't know who he was.
Sure.
Sat over there the entire time, didn't say a word, let everybody else on the panel take the heat. Even when I brought all this up to the table and asked every one of them what they thought about it, he still sat there and said nothing.
Yeah.
And at the very least, I think people need to at least know that this happened so that at the very least these people can be voted out of these seats. Because if people don't even know that this is going on, and like I've told you, you know, I do the independent journalism, it's part of my job. You know, if people don't even know that this is going on, even if it's 300 people that, you know, say Benson has a campaign rally or whatever, and 300 people or whatever are able to walk up to her and say, I know you helped steal our election. Whether she's prosecuted for it, whatever. I just think in some way, shape, or form, these people have to be held responsibly, whether it's lawfully, whether it's by the people, or whatever the case may be. It was just nice for an official of any sort to finally want to talk about it, because and I don't know if it's because they don't want to or they think they can't or whatever the case may be, but these are, whether they be moot now because of the close off of their avenues or whatever the case may be, these were still malfeasance.
Yeah, I believe so.
Right.
But to prove it is complicated.
Right. My sheriff in Iosco County did not, and there's a form called the Actionable Election Day Offense Sheet. And if my memory serves me right, it's 168.940 and 168.941, that any sheriff, peace officer, or prosecuting attorney being presented with or having knowledge of anything that could be deemed questionable action must investigate to the fullest extent of the law. And my sheriff,
You have a copy of that form?
Not with you, but could you send me one of those? I'd like to see.
yeah, absolutely. I know for sure I have it at home.
Okay.
Actually, I meant to print it out too, because I was gonna
Yeah, just take a screenshot of it and send it to me sometime.
I was gonna try to go over and talk to Sheriff Wrigglesworth in person today, but I don't think that's gonna happen because I tried going to my sheriff, and not only did my sheriff inform me that he was not going to pursue this in any way, shape, or form, even after me notifying him of the form and of his duties, whether it be frivolous or not, if I present you with evidence, if he got to this point right here and was like, oh, the legislator's doing this, so it doesn't even matter anymore. Any investigation at all. Or Sheriff Wigglesworth here in Ingham County. I called him as well. Same story. Even though I referenced, what he was able to do, it was still I'm not going to.
Where is Iosco County in the map?
Right about here.
Up above Saginaw.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just above Aranac County.
Sorry, my downstate geography is a little sketchy.
No, it's all right. But that was really bothersome to me that they gave me 5 minutes on the phone. It wasn't even, hey, well, come sit down for a second and let me see what you got. When somebody is speaking about something like that and they inform you, because and it's like I told the sheriffs, they know a lot more than I do. I'm not saying that I know their job or anything like that, but if you're uninformed in areas, like you said with the actual election day effect sheet, if you're uninformed in areas, just let me inform you, and then maybe since I informed you of that, maybe just hear what I have to say. But I didn't get that from my county.
Sorry to hear that.
He directed me, my sheriff told me, oh, you'd have to go to Ingham County because Lansing is where it would have occurred at. And so I called Sheriff Wigglesworth, and same thing from him. Told me to call the Attorney General. It's like, do you know how many times I've called the Attorney General's office? I've called the Attorney General's office 3 times. I've sent them 4 different emails with more than this, everything you have. I've sent them 4 different emails with all the evidence. I've emailed the Bureau of Elections, Jonathan Brader. I've talked with somebody at the Detroit office of the FBI, and everybody is just like, yeah, well, you are literally in a year, the first time that I've talked to anybody that will, even the explanations that you've given with how the process works and how the system works and, the avenues that these things have to go through, even that is appreciated. Because like I've told you through text, at least we know at the end of the day that we're being heard and not shut out. And there's a lot of people that do badmouth you. And there are plenty of times that I tell them, it can't all be bad. Because the way I see it is people that are truly doing bad and wanting to do bad will not answer you.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Right.
They don't care. They don't want you having any more information. They don't want you knowing anything else or communicating with you any further. It's like Logic. I'm friends with Logic.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like
I like him.
It's like I told Logic, I'm like, Senator McBroom could quit talking to me at any point that he feels like, but he doesn't. I'm like, and I know that there's a reason for that. Like, now you get people like our sheriffs that just, that's what I'm talking about. You have where they just think that, oh, nothing happened. Well, that's not up to your discretion.
It's I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the compliment. My experience too in all of this is that our sheriffs, my colleagues, people in general, are in the end very protective of their time. And when you come to them with an issue like, hey, I have this evidence that something happened
Right.
last election, and they look at it and they're like, well, that was last election, and it's already, the results are finalized, and it's months later, and they're like, to them, it's like, well, it's not worth my time because it's too late to do anything about it.
Right.
And for me, I guess I just look at my time probably a little uniquely in the sense that the whole reason I'm here is to listen to people. And on top of all of that, I'm a guy who really believes that even if I can't do something to fix what happened, I hope to be able to do something to keep that kind of bad thing from happening again in the future. And that's a little bit more of a prerogative a lawmaker has than a sheriff does, right?
Right.
Because a sheriff's kind of like, well, look, my job is arresting people.
Right.
And if I can't ever, if I look at this no matter how much I find out is wrong, if I don't think there's ever the chance I'm gonna arrest a person, I've just spent a lot of time doing something that I can't do my job with.
Right.
For me, on the other hand, I might be able to write a law to stop this kind of crap from happening in the future. So it's worth my time. But more than that, it's just, I like meeting people. I like, Logic wanted to meet with me. A lot of people told me don't meet with him. It was like, he says he wants to meet with me. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not hiding anything.
Right.
I'm not gonna lie to him. And I didn't. Now, he and I have a bit of a fundamental disagreement about what the Bible says on a few things.
Yeah.
To me, that's okay. There's a lot of people who, they and I disagree about what the Bible says. We aren't generally quite as public as Logic is about it.
Yeah. Logic is definitely
But I'm not
very,
afraid of him. I mean,
he's definitely very passionate.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I love that about him.
We've had our ups and downs, me and him ourselves too.
I wish
Um,
he had a little, just a little grace for somebody who has a different perspective on the Bible than him.
Right.
Quite honestly, I don't think we actually disagree. I think he just doesn't understand what I'm trying to say. But that's my opinion.
And see, and a lot of it too is,
I think he and I are actually very close to agreeing.
and a lot of it too, and it's coming out really bad right now. I'm sure you've seen the, we'll say squabbles that are going on.
Oh, yeah.
In the
It's
grassroots
awful, yeah.
movement, and that's another part of why I'm here today, is because so many people are losing focus, and to be quite frank, in my honest opinion, audit's not happening. There's, and I'm gonna say this, Joe Von Pulitzer is a con man.
I agree.
And, to anybody who might not like my opinion on that, I'm a very factual person, and I've seen mystical Roman swords being sold, and I've seen moon rocks being sold, and I've seen enough.
Now, I will caveat that there is a significant part of my analysis of him that says there's a strong possibility he's a con man. There's still a little part that I'm like, maybe he's not, but
That little bit of brain
part
line.
continues to shrink because everything else I continue to see is like, this is how a con man acts.
Right, he's a smart man. I will give him that. I will give him that.
He has kernels of truth,
Right.
without a doubt.
The other problem is the kinematic technology with the breaking of the fibers in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find the patent in his name. That's another problem that I have there, and that's a big one, because you're calling that your technology and you don't even have a patent or a patent number.
I spent
on
2
it.
hours on the phone with the guy, and I thought it was fascinating. I thought there was places to go with it. But then when I would try to help him understand some of Michigan's specific things, because he's not from Michigan.
Right.
So the motion to release the memos failed, 5-7.
No kidding. The independent commission, they're still refusing to release their memos. Can you believe that? Anyway.
Oh my
Outrageous.
gosh.
So, but I mean, with Joven, it's like, look, a conversation is a dialogue where people have some give and take.
Right.
Where I recognize there's things you know that I don't know. And the opposite is reciprocated.
Right.
And so Joven's sharing with me stuff about testing paper and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I don't know about that. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, that fits. Or other times I'm thinking, I need to do some additional checking to see whether what you're telling me is true or not, but I'll take that under advisement. And then when I try to reciprocate and say, here's some things I don't think you understand about Michigan, or at least I don't think you understand, and unless you can show me that you do, instead it was like, no, you're wrong, I know this, you're wrong. And it was like, okay, well, that's not exactly compelling evidence that I'm wrong. When you
Right.
just yell at me.
Right.
So when I would try to tell him, it's like, okay, but you understand, you want to check our paper in Michigan because you believe false ballots in Michigan can be determined by finding wrong types of paper. I'm trying to tell you that Michigan doesn't have a strong paper standard. People's ballots from different communities.
Yeah, there's a
They
lot.
come from different places.
There's a lot.
So you're not going to have unique paper. Other states have unique paper because
Yeah.
all their ballots come from a common source.
Yeah.
But we have counties that contract with this company and counties that do it themselves. And nowhere in our law does it say, thou shalt buy this paper for ballots. So I was trying to explain to him that. I'm like, how are we going to know when technically in Michigan, if I run out of ballots, the county clerk can go to a photocopy machine and copy out another ballot, scratch a number on it by hand and have you vote on that. I mean, that's legal.
Right.
So if that's legal, how am I gonna know? And here's the other irony I was trying to get across to him. I'm like, if county clerks, which is true, this is true, it's indisputable, but county clerks in Michigan are responsible for the acquiring of their ballots by purchase from a third party or by printing them themselves. And that county clerk has plans to stuff the ballot box with fraudulent ballots. Why would she produce ballots on a different set of paper to commit that fraud on, when she
Right.
has the ability to simply print a few thousand extra ballots to do it with the exact right paper? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so it's kind of like, so this whole theory, if the fake ballots are actually coming from the elections officials, why would they print them on fake paper?
Right.
You know, it'd be different if you were gonna do it and then somehow sneak the wrong ballots in and stuff the boxes, because you might not know where she got the paper.
Right.
But if the election official's doing it, why would they ever print the ballots on a different type of paper when they could just have them all printed with the rest of the ballots? And I tried to explain that to him, and I just got yelled at that I was an idiot and didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm kind of like, well, that's not exactly how dialogue works here.
Right.
I'm bringing up fair points.
Yeah, because I personally know for a fact, like you said, we don't, if barely non-existent paper regulations in our state.
Yeah.
And that's a very fair point. And you
And
know,
so when I get that kind of response from the guy, I don't walk away from the meeting thinking, I just talked to a guy who I should really take seriously. Instead, I walk away feeling like, is this guy selling something? And you know, it was less than a week after I talked to him that he came out and said, I've raised the money, Michigan, hire me. And I'm kind of like, so you find the money that then you want us to take so we can hire you so you can have the money you raised. That's not exactly a lack of conflict of interest going on there.
right.
So, yeah, so that's why I've kind of come down on the whole side of like, look, if we're gonna do something, we're gonna have like a blind draw for who's gonna do it. Because I
Something.
can't trust Joven is a fair arbiter.
Right.
But anyway, I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That's all good
But you're right, the
stuff.
whole thing's falling apart. With,
Yeah, that's
you know.
good stuff to know, because a lot of people, and I try to keep our citizens out of it as much as humanly possible. That's why I haven't done a show about everything that's going on. That's why I haven't really made comments publicly about Jovan or John Rocha or any of them, because our citizens and our people in Michigan don't need that right now.
And a lot of them are good people.
Right.
Pat Colbeck is a good man.
Yeah.
He's my friend. I'm really struggling with Pat right now because I don't understand some of the choices he's making. And what's particularly hard to understand for me is the willingness of all of these people, not just Pat. Pat is hard for me because I know Pat is a good man. But for all of them, to assemble together and promote contradictory views. So one guy says it's the machines. One guy says it's the ballots. One guy says it's something else. These are mutually exclusive theories of how you would steal an election.
Right.
You can't all be right.
Right.
And yet all these people with mutually exclusive viewpoints link arms and walk forward together, and I'm kind of like, which one of you is correct?
Now,
That's really
I will
hard.
say, other than this,
Mhm.
I don't put much stake in the fake ballots.
I don't either.
At all. What I do put stake in, because I've seen a lot of it myself, is you familiar with Cloudflares?
Cloudflare.
Yeah, it's a mechanism that's used to hide an IP address when you don't want your original one known. May or may not have done some digging on the backside of the internet, and I was able to trace the Cloudflares from Dominion Voting System and Smartmatic Voting Systems websites. They make stops, ironically, in Italy, Germany, the UK, Kansas, and the United States for whatever reason, don't know why, Los Angeles, and they both both IP addresses, because when you trace an IP address and when you trace the Cloudflares back, it gives you a latitude and longitude address. And then you go on Google Maps and
Find where it is. Yeah.
right, they both end in the same building in Barbados that's up for sale.
Do you have a sheet of paper that shows that tracing that you've done?
I can get it for you.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
Yeah,
Because I'm very interested still. I remain very interested in
Right.
all things. I'm not closed-minded to this at all. I mean, I put out the report to demonstrate where I was at that moment,
Right.
hoping to some extent that it would do two specific things. One, that it would at least help everyone who's questioning the election to be able to see some theories are just completely baseless.
Right.
And there is no reason to continue to spend effort on them. And then two, to allow people to at least have a base point of starting the argument and where they could
Right.
say, here's where those who oppose us are, and all we need to do is disprove this to progress forward.
Exactly.
And people have not been doing that with my report, which really shocked me to a large extent on either ground.
They haven't been doing it
They
with
haven't
anything.
abandoned the crazy,
Yeah.
and they haven't taken the things that I might have done wrong and then said, here's where this theory, where what Ed says and what his committee found breaks down, here's the evidence of why it breaks down, therefore let us go forward from there. Because I'd be the first one to say, yeah, let's go.
And
Because
that's
this
why-
is as far as I could get.
And that's why so many of us are getting so frustrated, because everybody's using the audit as talking points, and half of them are using it for their campaign. There's hardly anybody, because a year ago we started out strong.
Yeah,
You know, we were super strong.
Yep.
We were headed in the right direction. And these last about 3 months, everything has just went to pot. And
the charlatans are mixed in, they're the con men.
right, and it's been
That's
longer
fine.
than that. You know, you can only hold rallies and talk about getting an audit for so long. Like with the Citizens Initiative, where's the signatures? Where's the single dollar that's been raised to get the Citizens Initiative going?
You can't
What-
even agree on the language that's gonna be in it.
Right. And, you know, and like, another thing that I don't think I've sent to you that you might be interested in is the fact that Wayne County, and it labels them as internal and external. On the quote between Dominion Voting and Wayne County, there's two things that are concerning on that quote. One, you know, the Chicago warehouse that gets spoke of
Right.
with Wayne County.
Yep,
That's literally listed on their quote
okay.
as being the disaster recovery site center. And it has had its own 16 port router, along with the main facility, their headquarters at TCF or whatever, having two 24 port routers. And it's just so happens that there was 48 tabulators. And they had the tabulators along with the two 24 port routers on the quote from Dominion to Wayne County.
I thought TCF had 7 high-speed tabulators, 7 or 8 high-speed tabulators, I didn't think they had 48.
Well, I'm also going what was on their quote. They
Okay.
might have changed in the final contract
Well, we
as
might have had a
well.
lot of extra ones or something, I don't know.
Right. But I have all that as well. I have all the quotes from Dominion.
I'd be happy to see those things.
Yeah. I'll get those all
This has
emailed
been part
over
of
to
my
you.
problem too, is that people tell me things, but then they don't share them with me.
Another part
I get a
of
lot of people who say, I've got something,
Right.
and then they never send it to me.
Another part of Dominion's problem is in their own handbook, it says you have 3 options of internet connection.
Oh, yeah, no, that's true.
You know?
But, I mean, I've never disputed that. But it's important to recognize that just because the handbook says you can do something, doesn't mean that it was done.
Right.
I mean, that's,
True.
and yeah, one of those 3 options is you can have a modem.
Yeah.
But almost every jurisdiction in
Well, I
Michigan
mean, as far
doesn't
as
have them.
3G, 4G, and dial-up.
Sure.
You have 3
Yep.
different internet options when it comes
It's
to
an
the
option,
machines.
but it's not even in the machines necessarily.
Right.
So that's my point is, I buy farm equipment, and the manual comes, and it's for 10 different versions of the equipment with features that I didn't buy, and that's what I'm just saying. Is, I
Right.
mean, it's people would bring me the manual as evidence that they were connected to the internet because the manual says the thing
Right.
on it. But just because the manual says that's an option doesn't prove that any one single machine anywhere in the state was utilizing
Right.
that option.
Another interesting thing is, I want to know whether or not, because it was also in the quote from Wayne County, I would also like to know if their high-speed absentee ballot scanner
Mm-hmm.
was used there as well.
Oh, it was.
And see, now, was that, does that go along with the voting machines? Was that, those scanners also approved? Because a lot of people don't know that either. They think that, people are sitting there, like everybody thinks, that they're going through the ballots and comparing them. But if you have a high-speed scanner that's doing that, and if nobody knows about that, and that's what they're using,
That was, so, I mean, it took me a long time to kind of puzzle all this out too, but I mean, basically, they were having all of these tables that got boxes of ballots, and they had to
Right.
take them out and to process them, right? Check the envelopes, open the envelopes, check the ballots, lay the ballots out, et cetera, enter in the computer, so-and-so's envelope is here, make sure the envelope matches the number, et cetera, tell them the ballot's received so that the qualified voter file says, your ballot's been
right,
counted. At that point, it's believed that your ballot's counted.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it technically never makes it to the machine after that, QVF says your ballot got counted. Because once they tear the number off of the top, your ballot's now anonymous. There's
Yep.
no way of knowing it.
exactly.
So then the table's got a stack, and they build up a stack of 50 or 100 ballots, and then somebody takes it and carries it to the center where they had the high-speed tabulators. And then they put them through the tabulators, and the tabulators, of course, catch within those piles people who overvoted, people who undervoted.
Well, I
people who
mean,
screwed
I
up
think
their
we're talking
ballots.
about two different machines, because you have the tabulators and you have actual signature checkers. An actual machine, a high-speed
Oh,
machine.
yeah, they didn't use signature checker.
And see,
machines.
that's,
There was talk about using them, but they didn't use them.
right, and that's why I had the question of if they did or didn't, because there was reports that they would be used as early as 2020
Right.
down there.
But see, signatures got checked at the clerk's office, not at TCF.
Right,
And then the clerk stamps them and says, we checked this signature on such and such a date, it's the signature that matches. So when it gets to TCF, they're not checking signatures.
right.
Which was part of the confusion again. I mean, there's just so many, there's so many little complexities to things, and particularly our party, the Republican Party particularly, maybe you're not Republican, but
US taxpayers.
okay. But, I had to sign up for a party and I picked a Republican Party, otherwise I'd be an independent.
Right,
I mean, I'm not a big party guy, I'm an independent, but can't run as an independent and win.
Yeah.
So, anyway, where was I? Oh, our party, the Republican Party, did such a enormously crappy job of training people to know what actually is supposed to be happening, and when they're supposed to object, and when they're not, and what an objection means, and what it doesn't mean, and they were just incredibly lackadaisical on that, and the recruitment of people. And here's the worst thing, I think, at TCF for the Republicans,
Right.
is that we did not provide expert attorneys for ourselves at TCF. And so when people, whether it was Pat or Trucker Randy or anybody else from my side of the aisle who was there, who was skeptical, who was curious, who was legitimately worried, whatever it is,
Right.
and they kept bugging Chris Thomas or any other local official who was there, who aren't sympathetic to us in the first place.
yeah. No,
And they keep on bugging them, and after, 12 exhausting hours of this, Chris Thomas is like, F you, screw off, or whatever, and they ask, where'd these trucks come from? Why is the machine doing this? How come that person's not doing that? And they give him some pithy, smarmy answer.
right,
Our people took those in the worst possible context. And if we had had our own trained lawyers and stuff there, who could have then come to Pat or others and said, hey, I went and talked to Chris, and here's what's going on, and been able to explain that, and talk intelligently, that would have helped calm a lot of people down.
Right.
If somebody, so when these vans show up and people start saying, where'd they come from? And a couple of Democrats who don't care are like, I don't know.
Right.
Our side immediately takes it, what do you mean you don't know? How could you not know? We should know. Doesn't anybody want to know? This is crazy. And instead, if we had had one of our guys there who would have been able to say, let me check,
Yeah.
and gone and said, okay, both of these vans left the clerk's office. Those ballots are ballots that were dropped in drop boxes towards the end of the day, got picked up at 8 o'clock at night, got taken to the clerk's office. They've been all processed. They've been all stamped. The ones that didn't pass are out. They're not even here. And they got reboxed and they got drove over here. We know where they came from. It doesn't mean they shouldn't have better security. I'm not disputing
Right.
that. They should have manifests. They should have security. As far as I'm concerned, they should have armed guards on them. I'm not disputing that for a second. But at the very least, if we'd had somebody that our people trusted, who could have been in the know,
Yeah.
that could have communicated to them, rather than Chris Thomas saying, screw off, guys, I don't have to tell you squat.
And it is a big part of the problem that the Democrats, when it comes to groundwork, they blow us away, and
Yeah.
that's why they get
At least over in southeast Michigan.
right, and that's why they get as much as they do, and that's why they get as much organization and as much funding as they do, is because they're a lot more organized than us. I
Well,
mean,
they literally hire people in this world to be community organizers. Republicans don't hire people to be community organizers. Republicans hire people to serve food or to drive a taxi or to work.
Yeah.
Do you
We
know
work
if-
real jobs.
Just, as far as the recent election in Detroit.
Yeah.
For Duggan, right? Was there any organization within those, in your circle, who went and were poll challengers during that election?
I know that there was a few down there, names specifically I don't remember, but I know that a few of them were down there, and that's one of the good things that did come out of everything that happened is we have thousands of people signing up to be poll watchers, precinct delegates,
But hopefully they're from the area.
right.
Because I'm from the UP, okay? And granted, the UP's got a little bit of an inferiority complex. I'm not gonna dispute that. But, if I had a bunch of people from Detroit showing up to watch our elections in the UP, we'd be ticked off.
Right.
And I can't blame people in Detroit for being a little ticked off at all the Upers and Traverse City people who showed up to scrutinize their elections.
Oh.
Like, oh, you guys can't handle it. We
It
gotta
probably
be there to
doesn't
watch
help
you.
that they have, like, I think the last time I looked, they have 539 empty precinct delegate
Yeah.
spots
Yeah.
in Wayne County.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's one of the biggest pushes of our movement is getting people out and involved in this.
Yeah.
It's like I tell everybody, this is what happens when you leave the government to keep the government in check for as long as we have.
And this stuff here that you're bringing to me, that you're talking about, the best solution we have is if we want better laws, if we want better accountability, then we have to vote out the people who are stopping us right now from doing that. Because we've got bills to do some of this. Maybe they're not even that good because we're still trying to get bills that this governor will sign. We go a lot further in our 39 bill package. We tried to introduce something that at least from any objective observer's perspective would be reasonable. We didn't want to introduce a crazy Republican-only package that then
Right.
everybody would say, well, that's just as bad as what the congressional Democrats are trying to pass right now. We wanted something that objective media and observers would say, why is the governor against expanding boards of canvassers to 6 people?
Right.
Why is she against people being able to vote in nursing home common rooms? And why is she against driver's license, voter ID?
Yep.
We wanted a 39 bill package of things that nobody could really seriously say were objectionable policies. But if we didn't have this governor, we would certainly take additional steps and go a little bit further. And it's just frustrating.
But I can definitely see your point, or, I believe what you're saying is, why spend so much work on trying to get, and, maybe not like you know, you guys work hard, but I can see where you wouldn't want to spend a bunch of time creating things that as soon as you get done working on it, it's just gonna get slapped down.
Yeah. Right, well, that's why I went to talk to her today, you know, it's like, look, I think this is a good bill, but why are we working against each other here? I mean,
Right.
this isn't even a partisan question. I mean, we want boards of canvassers to have enough people on them to do the work. But ultimately, I mean, you know, the issues about the money, the Zuckerberg money, the Seidel money, the US,
Priorities
Priorities
USA,
USA.
yeah.
I mean, these are real problems that I keep on trying to entice my Democrat friends to recognize.
Right.
Look, the Republic, if two can play at this game, do we really want?
Right.
Do you want our side to ramp up this effort too in the next time to the
Right.
point where it's just crazy money season, helping local clerks run their elections to get out more Republicans?
It's like, do you want Americans for Prosperity?
Yeah.
You know, doing the same game on
Right.
the side.
You want the
Exactly.
you want the Koch brothers donating to your
Yeah.
local clerks? I'm like, so let's have a little like step back in perspective here is what I'm trying to encourage my Democratic friends.
Right.
And you say the public needs to know, and I'm trying to advance that final part of my report forward so I can come out and show people this really happened. These people gave money with caveats that to utilize this money, you must direct all your resources towards Democratic-based voters.
Right.
If that happened, people should know about it. And so I'm on the trail.
Guy Cecile's testimony in there is no, it's literally, and it's so weird that that's his testimony. It's nothing but complaining. If he's essentially saying throughout his whole testimony, if you guys don't stop the signature, and they always refer to it as the signature matching regime, is how they refer to it. If you guys don't stop the signature matching regime, then we will have to spend, Priorities USA, will have to spend more money in Michigan trying to convince people in Michigan, and we won't be able to spend as much money in another
So
state.
do you have that like in writing?
Yeah.
Yeah. that'd be
Yeah, you can have this one, because I got,
fine. Is that in the lawsuit?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, right here, Exhibit C, or I should say part of Exhibit C.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry for sneezing.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, his whole testimony is literally nothing but.
So who was he?
Guy Cecile is the chairman of Priorities USA.
Oh, okay.
One of the most, if not the most alarming part of this entire thing is because I've looked at Marissa Accardo too, and there's, other than her name being on this on this paperwork, I couldn't find anything else about her being involved.
So who found her to use her for the lawsuit?
I have no idea. That part, I have no idea. I found she had a LinkedIn account. That was about as far as I found. But to me, the most concerning part is with the law on her side. And in Jonathan Brader's own testimony, he says, and you can actually look it up on Michigan.gov, that we had, because Priorities USA claimed that we have no formal training for signature matching for our clerks. It's like, yeah, we do. We have one of the best in the country. We have instructors that are experts in that field, that our clerks, township and county, have to go to these classes once every 2 years and learn how to
That's what
do
one-
signature matching.
One of the clerks told me as we did legislation to undo this about signatures that forced it now to administrative rules, he's like, Ed, he's like, really the system we had was really good. He's like, it's not necessary to get administrative rules on this. We were doing a good job.
Right.
And I'm like, I hear you, Bob, I got you.
Like I said,
But
1,200 ballots in 6
But
years.
unless we do it now, the next Secretary of State, this Secretary of State could once again try this, or you could have some county try it at their own level. I'm
Right.
like, so now we're in this boat where we're gonna set up administrative rules on it.
The most concerning part was with all these laws on their side, our Bureau of Elections, because in Brader's testimony, he states that himself, along with the Bureau of Elections, so to me, that would refer to our entire Bureau, him, along with our Bureau of Elections, they had all the ground in the world to stand on. They were completely legally backed in telling Priorities USA no, and they just let it happen. And
Sue and settle. Sue and
Right.
settle is a huge practice of this current executive
yeah, these little
administration.
friendly lawsuits are absolute nonsense. And if it wasn't for people like, yeah, she violated the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, but it's like nobody, which you guys probably have the information, but to the public, the only things that were reported on was she violated the APA.
Yeah.
There was no lobbying group from Washington DC. Everybody just thinks, oh, she violated it because she felt like it.
Yeah.
No, it's right here. This is why she violated it. Her in conjunction, because there wasn't even a judgment submitted. So that means that Benson, on her own accord, along with Brader and whoever else, called or emailed or whatever Mark Elias and said, we concede in so many words.
And believe me, there's several other legislators, not just myself, who have been working on this issue. I mean, Senator Johnson especially, just
Right.
because of her being a Secretary of State beforehand. You know, she has been really hot on this issue for a long time, trying to do what you're doing, puzzle through all this pieces of data and draw this clear line of connectivity. But you know how hard it's been.
Yeah.
And it's challenging because you end up always having to make some conjectures. And
Yep.
proving conjectures in court is very, very difficult. So we can convince ourselves that we have found all the connections, but proving those connections are real gets dicey,
Right.
especially after 2 or 3 deep. And so, I mean,
I wondered some,
that's
actually.
been one of the big challenges on this, and I think that's why to a lot of us, it's like, well, it's at this point, it's about changing the next election and passing some laws that prohibit this kind of thing from happening much more clearly. It's, you know how, I tell people all the time, it's like, because why do we write laws, right?
Right.
Why do we need reform? It's because you make bank robbing illegal, okay, it's illegal. Then robbers figure out new ways to rob banks that we never thought of.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't have laws against robbing stagecoaches before there were stagecoaches. And so we're always having to reform because you always got to keep up with those who would find ways to circumvent the entire reason the law exists.
Right.
And so you have good election laws. Then people figure out new ways to get around them, and then we have to play catch up.
Now, how do you feel about her online process when it came to registration? Because technically, in our Michigan laws, applying online is not legally one of the ways that you can apply for an absentee
Yeah.
voter ballot.
So
You can apply in person,
I think that,
oral request, or federal postcard. They cover their butts on the federal postcard from an elected official.
so I would say, you know, I think that there's room for being able to request a ballot or request a registration form online.
Right.
Okay, I don't mind that. I don't think that we should be voting online.
Right.
You know,
Like the old system, right, where if you did that online, your first vote had to be in person.
right, that's certainly a
Right.
big thing.
And see, the second part of that voting online is it actually violates the equal opportunity, because when you go to do a absentee ballot in person, your social security number in any form is not requested from you. It's not something
Yeah.
they do. But when you do the one online, it
In person,
is.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I'd like us to think about, but is difficult as a conservative movement right now, because when I try to bring this up to a lot of conservatives, there's immediately a wall that comes down. And it did for me too when it first got brought up to me. It took me a long time to kind of dismantle that wall, really think about the problem objectively and say, are my concerns here justified, or are they actually outweighing the true nature of the situation?
Right.
So hear me out. You can wall me off, but I want you to think about it, okay? And that's the idea of early voting. Not 40 days of early voting, but 7 days, the week before Election Day. We allow people the opportunity to go and vote in person for 7 days. And when you look out around the country where this is being done, Florida, Kentucky, Ohio, a number of other states, it's been very advantageous for conservatives. And I think part of where we as conservatives are often a little presumptive is in the idea that conservatives are really good at voting on Tuesday because we're responsible, we're good citizens. Lazy people, liberals, they're the ones who can't be bothered to vote, so they have to get an absentee ballot. But in the end, the real reality is there's a lot of lazy conservatives too. There's a lot of conservatives who plan to vote on Tuesday, and then something happened. You know, babysitting, farming, work, the boss,
Yep.
whatever happens. So if we give people those extra days, it's good for both sides, but I think it's truly good for our side. And, you know, it's people coming home from church on Sunday saying, you know, I think I'll vote today.
And see, I don't have a problem with that at all.
If we go back to that, we are mitigating the amount of people who vote absentee. Because absentee voting is a pain. It involves paper that comes in your mail, and you fill that out, and you send that in, and you get a different one back, and you take that out, and you unfold it, and you sit and vote, and then you gotta fold it back up, you gotta stick it, you gotta sign in the right places, and it's like, wait, what, where do I sign? And you do all this stuff, and then it's like, do I still have enough time to put it in the mail, or should I drive it there? You know, and it's just all this stuff, and a lot of people are gonna be like, oh, you mean I can vote on Sunday? I can vote on Saturday after I mow the grass? I
Right.
can vote when I'm coming home from work on Wednesday? Oh, I forgot my ID today? I'll just come back tomorrow. You know, there's a lot of good things about it. And I'm
It's
trying-
like we were saying, I think one of the biggest problems is we did not have enough structure when it came to our elections. And, you know, the Democrats, they've always had, and they're starting to lose it now, but that's one thing that they've always had is unity.
So get this, in Colorado, they literally just mail out the ballot to everybody. But on the envelope that your ballot is returned in, they have a stripe on the ballot. And it's either a red stripe or a blue stripe or a green stripe. But the red stripe means that you need to show ID before you can vote. And if you have to show ID, you make a photocopy of your driver's license and you stick it in the envelope. And they're doing that. And I asked the clerks up there, I'm like, how did you get away with this without being accused of disenfranchising minorities? And the minority tells me, he's like, why would that be a problem? Everybody's got ID. I mean, it's right on the envelope. There's a red stripe.
And
And they have to open it up by hand and say, oh, look at this.
the ability of these people to, I probably won't ever understand how they're able to say they're for a specific type of people, but then demean those people's intelligence at the same time. Like when they talk about internet access, do you really think, are you saying that I, as a white person, would have more knowledge of how to use or have access to the internet than a minority? And if so, why? Why is that a statement in the first place?
Yeah, you haven't met my mother.
I've never understood how they can ride both sides of that fence and have everything
Well,
their
it's the
way.
same as my speech today. It's like, you want to get up and talk about the precious value of these children who were killed a few days ago. Right after one of your same members gets up and gives a speech about the value of killing babies.
Right.
What the heck? I mean, do you seriously not understand the enormous contradiction of what you just said?
Yeah.
I mean, it was mind-boggling.
It's anything that goes to the heartstrings.
But I'm telling you, what I witnessed in Colorado, fascinating. And the ability to just need to check. And then they also use machines, computers, to check signatures the first run through. And so the machine, if the signatures are very close, identical, and they have a file of your signatures for like the last 6 elections, And if it's a little bit off, spits it out, now humans have to check it. It was incredibly secure, incredibly accurate, but also incredibly flexible to the point where it's like, they set the machine, so it's very, very, like, if that signature's off a little bit, a
Right.
human's gonna check it. And the first human checks and like, oh yeah, this is the same guy, he just, his pen slid off the end of the line, on the last letter or something.
Right.
That one's good. If he's like, they're a little different, then he calls another person over, and two of them have to review it, and they both have to agree, a Democrat and a Republican. And then if those two can't agree, they call two more over, now 4 people have to agree. And they can go back and look at 20 years worth of signatures you've turned in that state to see how your signature has progressed over
Right.
20 years. It was fascinating. And then if at the end all 4 don't agree, they call the clerk over, she takes the ballot, puts it in a special box, they call the voter, and they're like, we got a problem with your signature. It's
Right.
not matching, you wanna come
And
in?
I can see that being a good.
Come in and show ID, tell us who
process.
you are. It is remarkable.
Now, I guess my last topic is,
Yeah.
how do you feel about these machines?
Which machines? Like
Voting,
tabulators?
because, yeah, me personally, I don't even think that it should be written, because I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think every voter, when they come in to vote, should be given their ballot, and they should be given a hole puncher. That way there's no other markings, no straight lines, you can't double mark, because if you double mark, then,
You can double punch.
Right. Yeah, you're definitely gonna be able to tell. And along with having an ID and going back to, and yeah, it takes a little bit longer, but how many days did we wait for our election results this last time? I believe that there's some things that should just stay basic, wheels, walls, and now elections. And that's how I feel about it. I encourage people, because I don't know how it works on the state level, but I know a lot of these contracts are signed on the county level, because not all of our counties have them. So what are your feelings on the accuracy, not necessarily fraud in general, but the accuracy of these machines, how these machines are portrayed, and how much we should put stake in them?
So, you're talking to my language, okay? Because one of my favorite stories is how Harry Truman, on election night, had a sandwich at 9 o'clock and went to bed.
Yep.
And when he woke up in the morning, the newspaper printed Dewey won, but it turned out Truman had won. And there's that famous picture of him holding up the newspaper.
Yep.
And to me, I'm very much of the same mindset. It's like, what is the big hurry? Okay? Take a couple of days, take a couple of weeks to count the ballots. That's fine with me.
Right.
Totally fine with me. I am not in a big hurry. But I have found over my 10 years of service that I am way in the minority when it comes to that. And it's unfortunate. I think the media and others have created a very false cultural perception that we need to know right now who won this election. I don't know how to unring that bell, okay? And so, as much as I'm comfortable waiting and think we should all just simmer down and move on with our lives and find out what the results are, I don't see that happening. The machines then, and here's one other interesting thing. I mean, if we're talking about going back to all hand recounting,
Right.
there is considerable demonstrable proof that in the end, all hand recounting, the first time anyway, is not nearly as accurate as the machines are.
Right.
Now, when they have to do a recount, where then they get a huge team of people, and usually the best and the experts and the lawyers, then the hand recounts are very, very accurate.
Right.
But Canada still does a lot of hand counting
Yep.
in the initial, because their ballots are very short.
Yep.
And that's where we break down. Our ballots are long. If we were just counting the presidential election by hand, we'd be fine.
Right.
But you've got to count a lot of things, and so mistakes start to happen. People put a tally mark in the wrong column. It's unobserved things happen. So machines have proven not just to be faster, which is certainly true, but they've proven to be exceptionally accurate. And I am, despite the fact that I'd be totally comfortable with slowing everything down, I'm also extremely confident in the accuracy of the machines. I have been through this 6 ways from Sunday, in the last year, looking at the machines, and been so amazed at the great lengths that are going through to make sure that the machines are, one, unhackable. Now, about 12 years ago, 10 years ago,
Right.
there were a lot of problems. But what they've done since then to make sure the machines are not this, you can walk in and control them with your phone kind of thing. And then in Michigan, where we have mandated that paper ballots continue to exist so we can still go back and validate afterwards. And then we put these post-election audits in place where every single county has randomly selected precincts and specifically selected too, like TCF.
Right.
Where we take precincts that have had past problems or past controversy, we say, we're gonna audit them too. But we also do the random ones. And we take out all those ballots and we hand recount them, and then we match it to what the computer said too. That to me has demonstrated again and again and again, not just in 2020, but
Right.
every election, to be remarkably accurate. It's incredible. And then, when you make that little mistake on your ballot where you drip the pen on the first oval and then you fill in the other one.
Yep.
For me, and you probably, we say, that's it, I need a new ballot. You
Yep.
rip it up, give me a new ballot.
Yep.
But a lot of people don't,
Right.
and they, whatever. And those machines spit those out and force two humans to sit down and determine what happened here.
Right.
And if they put, please not this one, please this one, people do that. They
Yeah.
literally do that. And then other times they can't tell, and they're like, well, this one's just, we're not gonna count that race, or we can't tell, they overvoted.
Right.
But when we do the audits, we catch those and we account for those. And it's remarkably accurate. It's so fast, and it's really amazing. And so, as much as I'm very comfortable going, hey,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned, the machines could count them, and we could keep the results locked up for a month.
What-
But I'm not in a hurry. But boy, the machines are actually better than people
Right.
at doing this, counting 150 to 200 million votes.
And if you look
Right.
at like election day, right, someone throws it in and it spits it right out. If you're doing all of those, where are you putting that ballot?
Right.
Because you would end up with more mistakes, because you'd have mistakes from election day and absentee.
Right.
And so there would need to be a way for a safeguard if you did decide to hand count everything,
Right.
right? 'Cause I've been a poll challenger for years, and I've been in poll challenging where someone actually votes once, they mess up, it comes back, they actually mess up a second time.
Right.
And they've actually used 3 ballots to really fix things, because they finally realize, I can't vote for 4 out of 5 trustees, I gotta vote for 3 out of,
Right.
whatever. So anyway, it's just so,
Yeah.
those machines on election day provide a really nice safeguard percentage-wise.
Right.
Because if it wasn't machines and it was people, you would vote faster than they could read. So you'd leave, and then they'd get there, and it's like, oh, Paul voted for 4 when he could only vote for 3.
Right.
Well, they wouldn't know it was you, right? Because now they don't even know who to call,
Yeah.
because you're gone. So
You'd
the
have to
machines-
have machines to, in some degree, to at least catch those
Right.
mistakes.
I can't believe some states are doing electronic voting.
Yeah.
I can't believe some states are doing that.
Yeah.
'Cause that's
Strictly
scary.
electronic.
We need paper ballots. And I think the system we're using in Michigan, you remember when Florida screwed up?
Yeah.
That was my first election. I mean, that was my first election, was the presidential election of 2000. And, because I turned 18 in 99.
Right.
And I remember being like, I filled out a bubble in Michigan. What's this
Right.
crap going on in Florida?
I think one other thing that would really help everybody and would specifically help you guys, and I forget the MCL for it, and I haven't been able to find these numbers, and maybe you guys have them or whatever, but by 9 p.m. prior to election night, or by, I believe it's 4 p.m. on election day, all clerks are supposed to have posted in their office for public viewing the number of absentee ballots that were sent out, the number that were received back, and the number that were going to be counted.
Yes.
And were those posted in places like
We
Wayne?
requested them. It's kind of hard for us to identify whether or not they were posted properly or not, because we weren't. Not
Well,
in
I
the
just thought that,
jurisdiction.
right, that would,
But
that would squash a big part of what happened
we
at TCF
requested
and
those,
Wayne.
and just from random areas. You
Right.
know, every once in a while, it's like I've called up and
They've given them
asked
to
for
us.
that.
We
Yeah.
haven't found a single place that didn't have those numbers.
Right.
Like Paul said, we don't have any way of checking to know they put them up at the right moment and at the
Right.
right place.
And see, I
But
thought
they
that
had
that
the
would
numbers.
help squash a big part
They'll-
of that, because if you had, they say, on the sheets from the clerk's office
Mm-hmm.
that this many people registered to vote absentee, and then it turns out that this many people voted absentee, that'd be a really easy way to
Right.
check and balance
So
that.
those were checked during those post audits though, that particular thing gets checked. And to make sure that there weren't more ballots than applications received. Now, there's always a little bit of fray on the edges because, well, then you also have the military overseas ballots
Right.
coming in, and those have to be recopied, and so poll books often have a 1 or 2 ballot imbalance in them that we
Right.
can't figure out why, because somebody made a mistake.
Right.
And I have often told people, it's like, if the vote had come down to 1 or 2,000 votes, I'd be really concerned. I would
Right.
genuinely be really concerned. I mean, I found out that the whole idea that people could have impersonated other persons by fraudulently filling out these applications that they received, that senile people in nursing homes had some nurse care
Right.
person vote for them, I believe that happened. I really do. That's why I never say there's no fraud.
Right.
Because I think it's very clear there was some fraud.
Sure.
But the issue is, I can't piece that together in such a way to believe that it was 100,000.
Right.
And so if the total vote between Trump, Biden, John James, and others was down in